in reflecting on 2017, I did some reading of some articles this past week of news articles and kind of what were the highlights of 2017, and mostly that was depressing. If you go and look at the top news articles of 2017, you read through the list, and you're like, man, what a terrible year. And it was pretty much like other years. Had some political stuff that was difficult, had some natural disasters. People did terrible things, and that's what made the biggest headlines in the news this year. And so I was like, well, after reading it, I was like, oh, that is sad. And then after that, I thought, well, let me try and find some news articles about cool stuff that happened or fun things or interesting things. And so I was, searching around and clicked on this article, the top 10 pop culture events of the year. And so I read through those and discovered I know nothing about pop culture. About number 5, I realized it was Teen Vogue website. And so I don't connect with that at all. There were three items on the list that I knew anything about. And so, yeah, that was new to me and helped me understand myself better. Apparently, Beyonce had some babies. So there you go. If you didn't know that, that's what you get out of this morning. So, and so the more I thought on New Year's and even thinking about being able to share with you guys today, I was less and less excited about New Year's because really it's just a change of a number on the calendar. And so then I thought, what I am excited about is Christmas. And I love Christmas. And we could talk about Christmas all the time. As Josh said, like Christmas is relevant all the time, whether it's December 25th or not. So in light of that, I want to circle back and talk about some more stuff that happened around Christmas because it is relevant as we move into a new year. And what we talk about this morning is my hope that even though it has to do with the Christmas story, even Christmas is behind us now, and maybe you've taken down your Christmas decorations, maybe you're going to leave them up for 2 more weeks or a month or so. Not judging you, that's fine if you do. But even though it's behind us, and typically we look at the characters and the story we're going to look at today only in the Christmas season, it's my hope that looking at it outside of that with Christmas behind us, maybe we can see it in some fresh new light. So here's what I want you to know and want you to understand. It's something we say a lot here at Resonate, and that we hope that it's something that you live in this reality, and that's the fact that God is constantly trying to speak to us. God is constantly trying to get into your world, to get into your mind, get into your life and speak to you. He wants you to hear him. He has something to say to you. And so as we look at this morning, I want us to look at 2 characters from the Christmas story. One that you always hear about with the Christmas story and one that often gets overlooked. And how they responded to God. How they responded to Jesus. Because if God is speaking to us, if the creator of the universe is trying to talk to you, man, you should listen to that. That's worth listening to. If the one who knows you better than anyone else, the one who knows all about you, where you've come from, where you're going, he knows your own hopes and dreams better than you know your hopes and dreams. If he has something to say to you, you would do well to listen to him. And so for us to think this morning, how are we going to respond to him when he calls? And so let's get into this. If you have, we're going to look at one character in the book of Luke, where we spent this past fall, and one character in the book of Matthew. So if you have your copy of Scripture, if you'd open that up to Luke chapter 1. We're going to look at the first character, and that character is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And as we look at her, we're going to read a bit of her story, a few excerpts from the story of Mary, and where we learn some stuff about her, and we get to see how she responds. But I want you to read through this with us and think about who was Mary and how did she respond, and how do you identify with her? So two responses. Mary is the first one. Luke chapter 1, starting in verse 27, it says this. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings to you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Well, Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Verse 30, but the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will call him Jesus, and he will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." Verse 34, how will this be? Mary asked the angel, since I'm a virgin. Verse 35, the angel answered that the Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail. I am the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May your word to me be fulfilled. And the angel left her. Skip to verse 41. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greetings, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice she exclaimed, blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leapt for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promise to her. And Mary said, my soul glorifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. Mary's interaction here with the angel and how she responds is profound but also revealing. And oftentimes we read through this and we think, man, what a place to be in life. You're carrying the Son of God. You're going to be his mom. And a lot of parents in this room, you know the weight you feel in parenthood of, I got to take care of this thing. But then the weight of, I've got to take care of this thing because it's really important. And so all that goes in with that. And then just the questions of wait, how's this going to work? How are you going to do this? And so I want us to look at 4 ways that Mary responds, because it is an education for us and healthy response to God. And even as we think about this story, the writers of the Gospels, they had tons of content to pull from. And we see that Luke included this content about Mary for a specific reason. And I think it's to help us understand how to respond to God. And even as Luke, as he's starting off the book of Luke and the book of Acts that he writes of telling the story of Christianity all the way back from the beginning of when Christ comes to the establishment of the church. And he says, let me start with this story of how to respond to God. Let's look at Mary. The first way we see that Mary does that is Mary responds thoughtfully. Mary responds thoughtfully. Oftentimes, what we need to see is that Mary doesn't respond with blind faith, but with thinking faith. Oftentimes, we assume that to be a Christian and to be all in and to be as good as Mary was, to be seen as blessed and as worthy to carry the Son of God, that she must have had some blind faith, some extreme faith, that she didn't ask any questions. But that's not true. That's not what we see here. In fact, she had a thoughtful faith. When it says in verse 29, Mary was greatly troubled by his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. This word wondered in the Greek, it has this nuance of taking an audit of what was happening. It was adding things up and weighing it all out. It was very rational. She was thinking through all that was going on. And there was a lot going on, what this meant for her in her culture and society, what this meant for her family as she's processing everything. It's profound what all she was thinking, what she was weighing out. So she was deeply processing this, and she asked the question in 34. She begins to interact with the angel that's bringing this message, and asking questions, not just taking it at face value and saying, well, all right, whatever you say, but asking questions. She says, how can this be? Her faith included her intellect. She asked questions. Now, in the same chapter of the Bible, just before this, we saw another story of an angel showing up to someone saying, hey, you're going to have a baby. And it was Mary's cousin that's brought up here, and her husband, Zechariah. And he was a very religious person. Zechariah and Elizabeth were stellar people, great folks. And Zechariah was even at this time, and when he meets the angel, he's gone into the temple of the Holy of Holies to represent the people and carrying out his duties there. And he meets the angel there. And Zechariah also asks a question when the angel comes to him. But we see something different happen there. Because of his response, he asks a question, and he's made mute until the baby is born. So we see that the angel was not pleased with his question asking. So then that causes us to ask the question, why? What's going on here? Why is when Zechariah doubts or asks questions, it looks like this. When Mary asks questions and doubts, it looks like this. What's the difference here? Well, we'll have to kind of read into this a little bit, but oftentimes when we think about doubt, it's seen on two spectrums or two poles, if you will. Skepticism and doubt, it's seen like this. Either A, and usually this is from like maybe a very secular or intellectual, not that those are necessarily the same thing, but cultures or settings and interactions. This side of the spectrum says we should always be skeptical. You should always doubt. That's of the highest good, is to question everything. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you see what sometimes is very traditional and sometimes very religious groups of people. When they think about asking questions and doubting, they say, well, you can never doubt. You can never. That's even sinful to ask questions. And so both of these spectrums are incorrect and not what the Bible communicates. Neither of them is true. What we see, what the Bible says, is that we can doubt, we can ask questions. In fact, the Bible communicates regularly people that are heroes of our faith asking questions, essentially engaging their faith with doubts and allowing their doubts to fuel their questions. And so what this reveals to us, and as we think about how we respond to God, I want you to see this, that you can respond with doubt, but you can have two kinds of doubt. They're this. You can doubt with an open mind, or you can doubt with a closed mind. To doubt with an open mind, it looks like this. An open mind seeks answers. An open mind, when they doubt, they seek answers and they're open to the truth. They're open to what's really going on. They say, hey, I have questions because I don't understand. Tell me more about this. And they're willing to hear what the truth actually is. And in that, they're willing to relinquish control over their lives. They're saying, I'm willing to give up what I think to be true. I'm willing to ask these questions, but I'm open to what might be. So that's doubting with an open mind. The opposite of that is doubting with a closed mind. If we think about this, when we doubt with a closed mind, what's really going on here is that we're in defense mode, that our doubts or our questions are really just a defense mechanism to guard against what might actually be true. To say, I don't want to know what's true, so I'm asking these questions to keep that truth at bay, to keep that truth out of my life, because I want to maintain what I have here. That really our doubts, or those questions, if we're doubting with a closed mind, our doubts help us stay in control of our lives. Our doubts help us stay in control of our lives. So when we think about how are we going to respond to God, we need to respond as Mary did, thoughtfully. Engage your intellect. Think through it. Christianity is not for dumb people, or does not ask you to dumb down your life or what's going on around you. But really it means to step into those questions and step into those things that come up as you wrestle with what you know from the world around you, as you question who God is and say, okay, God, really, show me what is really true. I want to learn from you above all else. That's a great place to be, as opposed to, I don't want to hear from you and I want to keep what I have and defend what I have and keep you out of it. That'd be to approach it with a closed mind. Second, Mary responds gradually. We see a process as Mary interacts with the angel and then she interacts with Elizabeth. We see a process of her responding to God in this. Mary goes through the process of responding in faith. First of all, we see that she asks that question in verse 34, how can this be? She's asking questions. That's kind of that first step where she begins to, as we said, she's interacting thoughtfully. Then she goes on and she says, this is a profound statement and we'll have to come back to it in a moment. She says, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled, in verse 38. Now, if you read into that, you say what she's not saying is, oh, wow, okay, well, that's exciting. Let's get right to it. It's not exactly what she says, but instead it's more like, I don't fully understand, but I'll follow and I'll take the next steps. I hear what you're saying. This doesn't make complete sense to me, but I'm willing to be your servant. I'm willing to take the next steps. So she's gradually, in faith, moving towards what the angel presents to her, what God's calling her to. gradually responding. And third, what we see is she goes and she spends this time with Elizabeth. The angel said, hey, your cousin, your relative Elizabeth is also pregnant. And so as soon as the angel left her, she packs her bag and says, I got to go see Elizabeth. If this is true, what's happened to Elizabeth, then this will help me understand what's happening with me, and it's all going to come together. So that's exactly what happens. She shows up, and Elizabeth affirms what has happened, affirms what's happened in her, affirms what's happened in Elizabeth, and all of it comes together. And then, as she gradually responds to God's call in her life, as she can, in one way you can look at this, she connects with her community, and what God has said is affirmed in that setting. Then you see Mary respond fully in praise. She says in verse 46 and 47, my soul glorifies, my spirit rejoices. All of her is in now, not just her intellect, but all of her. And she's worshiping in what God has called her to. We need to understand this. When we respond, it's going to happen gradually. To say this is how faith works. There's stories in the Bible, there's stories in Christian history, there's story of maybe in your life or people in this room, that some of us, we respond, it's like it hits us like a lightning bolt and like, whoa, my life has changed all of a sudden. And others of us, it takes some time. You process through this and you take steps gradually where your faith becomes stronger and stronger as you respond to what God's calling you to. And that's okay. Both are okay. And that's what we see in the story from Mary. And what we need to understand, that faith will keep you moving. If you're walking in faith and responding to God, faith will keep you moving beyond just mental engagement and even just religious duty. But it'll move you forward to engaging the whole person, to a place where you can come and respond to God in mind, will, and emotion, all of you. And it's okay that it's gradual. To respond gradually like that is okay. And to know that that's fine, even Mary did it. But it requires us to take those next steps along the way, even if we don't understand it completely. Number 3, Mary responds with personal awe. Personal awe. She takes a moment, and you read it as you read through almost her psalm that she writes there, that's written there in Luke chapter 1, where you begin to see her interact. She says in verse 48 and 49, she says, the mighty one has done great things for me. The mighty one has done great things for me. And she is, you can see it, she's in awe, and she's responding. She talks about what the mighty one is doing for Israel as a people, and she gets it's the promised Messiah we've all been waiting for, and I get to be a part of that. So she responds, she sees the big picture, but she's also responding with personal awe, personal worship. And while the circumstances for Mary are very unique, obviously, I don't think any of us, I can say this with a lot of confidence, none of us are going to carry the Son of God in our womb, okay? I'm pretty sure that's true for me, but I'm also pretty sure it's not true for you. So that's very unique circumstances. However, I think we can learn from Mary in this, that we all need to come to a place where we are in awe of God's personal pursuit of us, where you find a moment where you allow God to say, He has pursued me. God has done great things for me. God came in the form of man and saved the human race, and He saved me. Of all people, He saved me. All of us need to come to a place, if not daily, at least at some rhythm of regularity in our life where we are astonished by that fact, where we are in awe of that reality. And that stirs in us worship just as it did for Mary. And so if that's not normal in your relationship with God, ask Him, God, remind me of my salvation. An exercise that I regularly tell people to do, and I've probably told some of you this already, is that you should take a moment, maybe this is something you do in your journal this week, maybe you reflect on 2017 and your new year and all of that. You can say, God, where would I be without you in my life? And think about it. If you think back and you think about your own personal tendencies and your bent and your personality and the sin that's in your life and the stuff you know you struggle with in the past, and think about what if God had not intersected your life? Where would you be right now? What would 2017 have looked like? And what would the hopes of 2018 be? Where would your life be right now? And I hope that you see that it would be worse. It would be darker. And that would stir in you. It's like, man, God, you saved me of all people. You rescued me out of that to bring me into this, into something better. May you respond in personal awe. Number 4, we see that Mary responded in willing surrender. Mary responded in willing surrender. Mary was willing to trust God even if it meant the end of her life as she knew it. even if it meant the end of her life as she knew it. Now, this is a common reality, or something that we're aware of in the story of Mary and this visit from the angel and giving birth to this child. But the social realities that she lived in, that her and Joseph lived in, she was about to have a child. And even if Joseph stayed, which was in question at this point, even if Joseph stayed when he found out what was going on, there were still social realities that were going to be challenging. People were going to add it up. They were going to say, okay, Mary and Joseph, they were married on this day, and the baby was born on this day, and hang on, something's not adding up here. And in that culture, that was big. That would have been huge gossip, and she would have been shamed and shunned in that culture. And she would have been the bearer of an illegitimate child, and that would have been what everyone thought about her child, at least from how she could see it from right there. The community would either say that, well, her and Joseph, clearly they had sex before they were married, or she was clearly not faithful to him as his fiancée. And likely she had her own plans in mind. She probably said, okay, me and Joseph, we're probably going to live near our parents, and we're going to get a house, and it's going to look like this, and this is how I'm going to keep the house, and this is what Joseph is going to do, and this is how we're going to live our life, and this is how many kids we're going to have. And all of that in this moment, as the angel visits her, all of that begins to be put in question. All of her hopes and dreams and plans are now, there's big question marks and blanks put into that. And all of this, processing through this, she says and makes that bold statement, I'm the Lord's servant. May your word be fulfilled. And despite the cultural circumstances, she's able to say that. She's able to say that this may mean a life of disgrace and the end of all my hopes and dreams. But whatever comes, I accept it. That's a bold statement. And she responds in willing surrender. Willing surrender. She says, I'm willing to give all that up, to put that on the altar, if you will, or put that before you, God, and trust you with it, even though it doesn't make sense to me. No matter what people are going to say about me, no matter what people are going to say about my husband, no matter what people are going to say about my kid and my family, I'm willing to set that aside and trust God with it, even though it doesn't make sense. We see Mary in this. We see her respond in these ways, and it paints a beautiful picture of what could be, of how we can respond. And even as you process through that, maybe it helps you and say, okay, that's helpful to know I have the freedom to respond gradually. I have freedom to respond thoughtfully. Or maybe you're challenged to say, am I willing to surrender like that? Can I respond like that? Is there a sense of awe in my life as I think about responding to God? Maybe that challenges you. To help push in that one more time, I want to present this second character. Hopefully this will clarify as well as we move into a new year how we can respond to God. Second character is in Matthew chapter 2. Again, as I said, it's a character who we don't often talk about at least not specifically or directly, as we think about this Christmas story. But it's the character King Herod. Not a great guy. Not someone we like to reflect on a whole lot. But let's read a little bit about him. Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw this star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. Verse 7. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and as soon as you find him, report to me, so that I may go and worship him." On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. And then they opened their treasures and presented him with gold and frankincense and myrrh. Verse 12, and having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So we see here Herod, he responded to God in a starkly different way. A little backstory on who this guy was. King Herod was the king. His title was the King of the Jews. And essentially he was part of the puppet government that the Romans had set up, who were really in charge. They allowed King Herod, who was himself Jewish, to represent on behalf of the Romans, to represent some form of leadership in that area, so the Jews could have their own leader, but really he was a puppet governor for the Jewish people. So, but he had this title. One of his titles, maybe he gave it to himself, was Herod the Great. He was famous for some significant building projects that he oversaw in the area. That was kind of his big thing. Let me build some cool buildings, and I'll be great because I established all these great buildings. One of those benefited the Jewish people and probably helped garner some influence with them, and that was that he helped reconstruct the temple that they used to worship. And that was a building project that went on throughout his lifetime and well on after. He was also known, and history knows him as a very violent ruler, as we see even from this story. He killed members of his own court and even members of his own family out of this sense of paranoia, of protecting his reign and protecting his throne, if you will, and his leadership. He had like 10 wives and subsequently a lot of kids, and he killed 2 of his sons in the process, and one of his wives at least. So much so, this was his reputation, that Caesar Augustus made a famous pun about Herod the Great, saying, "I would rather be one of Herod's pigs than one of his sons." And apparently, in the Greek, those 2 words sound similar. So you could imagine Caesar Augustus saying, "Well, I'd rather be one of his pigs than one of his sons," right? And everybody's like, "Oh." It's even worse in English because I don't speak Greek. So this was him, and this was his reputation. This is who this guy was. And so you can imagine when these 3 guys, in addition to that, early on in his reign, Jerusalem was conquered by some of the nations to the east, came in, and for a short time, Jerusalem was under the rule of these eastern kingdoms. So in this moment of time, when these magi show up, these people from the east, Herod was pretty confident with everything to the west. He wasn't worried about anything in the west because the Roman Empire is very well established. But the east, everything to the east, the Middle East nowadays, was very much in question. And so he was constantly worried about people invading from the east. So here comes these strangers from the east showing up. And so verse 3, it says that Herod was greatly disturbed. And that's one of the biggest understatements probably in the Bible. As well, Jerusalem was also disturbed, because if Herod wasn't happy, nobody was happy. And so here comes these 3 guys showing up, and they walk into his palace, and they say, "Hey, we're here to see the King of the Jews." And they didn't mean him. And so that stirred some stuff up, you can imagine. And so he kind of tries to figure out this situation, and he asks questions of these guys, and he says, "You go and find the guy, then you tell me where he is, okay? Tell me where this kid is." And so as we think about this, I've always thought, and this is fascinating, that even baby Jesus lying in a manger, this innocent little child, new on the scene, even as a young child, already there are people who don't want him, who don't like him, who are threatened by Jesus, even as a child, as an infant, as a toddler, perhaps at this point. There are people who are bothered or disturbed by the presence of Jesus, and they're afraid of the mess he might cause for them. That's the story of Herod. Now, this is how he responds and how we see him respond. And I think there's part of us that we need to recognize that we all have a little bit of Herod in us. As we process through this and we think about how are we going to respond to God as we move forward, we need to be aware that all of us have a little bit of Herod in us. This is how we see him respond. First of all, we see him respond in self-protection. He was self-protective of his kingdom. In the same way, if we're honest with ourselves, we are often self-protective of our kingdom. We look at our life, we look at what we have going for us, and we look at what we own, and we look at what we're in charge of, and we look at what we do. And we need to be honest with ourselves and say, where am I being self-protective? Where am I protecting my stuff? Where am I protecting my reputation? Where am I protecting what I am in control of? We're self-protective of our kingdom. We have goals and desires and plans, and we'd like, if we're honest, we'd like Jesus to be we'd like Jesus to be in alignment with us and with our goals and desires and plans. We want Jesus to enhance our kingdom, not join his. But you need to know, in broad, the call to follow Christ, to be a follower of Jesus, to be a Christian, is not to invite Jesus into your kingdom, but instead an invitation for you to join his. And so, we need to recognize that within us. Where is Herod alive and well within me? Where I'm protecting my own kingdom like Herod was. Secondly, we see Herod respond in paranoia. Paranoia about someone taking over his kingdom. So he said, here comes these guys from the east. Oh, I know what these guys are up to. They're probably like scouts. They're trying to figure it out. And probably the invasion forces are right behind him. If I let these guys hang in here, or more importantly, what is this news they're bringing? This kid who's the king of the Jews. I've heard these prophecies. I don't really pay too much attention about the religious stuff because I'm more concerned about the political stuff. But I'm Jewish and I know about the Messiah. And imagine how dark this got. The Messiah was the hope of the Jewish people. He was the hope of Israel. Everyone knew about him. I'm sure Herod knew about him. And yet Herod said, no, I would rather maintain my crown. I would rather maintain my reign of power than give it over to the one who's supposed to come, the one who's prophesied, the one who knows how to do it best. No, I'd rather do it on my own. And he was paranoid about anyone challenging his own kingdom. I think we see this. We see paranoia in ourselves when we are cautious about others' ideas for our life. When we see others speak over us or invite us in to follow Christ, and we are paranoid or we're cautious about the ideas others have. We're nervous about what they may require of us. What they may require of us. If we see our Christian community around us following after Christ, sometimes we may feel a pause that says, wait a minute, if I get too involved with those people who are following Christ, I'm afraid what it might require of me. Or if I realize what it really means to follow and live a sacrificial life of love that God calls us to as Christians, that makes me nervous about what that might require of me. We are cautious, and that leads us to be cautious about getting too close to God. And we're paranoid about what God may ask of us, and we're afraid of what he might call us to do or what he might call us to give up. And so we get cautious. I hope that you feel this tension in your own mind where you feel like that's ridiculous. Why would I be cautious about letting God into my life, the one who knows me better than anyone else, the one who knows me so well and loves me and has pursued me and has saved me, and yet I'm paranoid about what he might ask me to do. And thirdly, we say, so we do our best to keep God at bay. And sometimes we say, well, let me fulfill enough religious duties or go about this Christian life, at least on a surface level, hoping that will keep God happy and the Christian community around me happy. So say, well, I guess he's doing good enough. I guess she's doing all right. So that maybe if we keep God happy enough by the things we do, that he won't ask too much of us because we're paranoid about him taking over our kingdom. Thirdly, we see Herod respond by rejecting authority. By looking at saying maybe there is a God who sees it and does it better, and his interest for Israel is better than my own, and his ability to lead the religious people and the spiritual people within Israel and to interact with the Romans, his plan for that is better than my own. Instead of saying that, he says, no, I don't want to have an authority over me. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all have authority issues. And I think if we're honest, we're just like, there's a little bit of Herod in us. We have authority issues. We don't like others telling us what to do. We don't like others saying, this is not okay, or this is what you should do, or this is what you need to do. We don't like other people getting into our business like that. We can respond like Herod, or we can respond like Mary. I think we need to ask ourselves the question, is that true for us? Do you recognize the Herod in you? And I hope that you do, and I hope it bothers you. I hope that you are unsettled with that. And maybe you thought you were doing okay as you wrap up 2017. Maybe it was a great year for you, and how you grew in the Lord and what happened in your life was really good. But I think as we move into a new year, I have a prophetic word for you. I want to tell you about the future. In 2018, God wants to speak to you. I can say that with confidence. He wants to speak to you. And the question for all of us today, and as your pastor, one of your pastors, I want you to respond to God as he calls you to. And I recognize it will not always make sense to you in the moment. And I recognize it will not always be easy. But I want you to respond thoughtfully, to be willing to process it gradually, to move forward in your faith. I want you to respond and be in awe of who God is. And I want you to be able to willingly submit, willingly surrender to him. And to die to the flesh, to die to that old self, to die to rebellion, to the God who knows it better, who sees it clearly. So, in preparation to hear from God, I want to ask you two questions this morning. And this is something for you to go on and think about this week as you think about a new year, as you prepare for when God speaks to you this year, as you prepare for what he may say to you tonight, as you prepare for what he may say to you next week, in the coming weeks and months. Two questions for us to process and think about together. Number one, are you willing to obey anything the Bible clearly says to do, whether you like it or not? Are you willing to obey anything the Bible clearly says to do, whether you like it or not? That's a big question. Number two, are you willing to trust God in anything he sends into your life? Are you willing to trust God with anything he sends into your life, whether you understand it or not? Are you willing to trust God? Those are big questions. And at the crux of your answer to those questions is at the heart of Christianity. It's the heart of following Christ. Will we respond like Mary? Will we respond like Herod? Resonate Church, may we be people that respond to God. We listen for his voice. We say yes. He says, and be able to say, I am your servant. May it be as you say. I want that for us. I want that for us in the new year. Because God will speak to us. May we be listening for him. May we be ready to respond.